Hello, students of psychology. I'm Bruce Hinrichs, and in this video, you're going to learn about a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus. I think after watching this video, the hypothalamus will become your favorite part of the brain. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. See you later. About in the middle of the brain is a set of structures that altogether are called the limbic system. The word system means a bunch of different brain parts are working together. And the limbic system is very important for sort of lower instinctual kind of responses, emotional responses, and fight or flight, and hormones, releasing hormones that go through the bloodstream and influence behavior and thinking and mood. And so the limbic system is very important for psychology. At the center of the limbic system is the thalamus. And the thalamus is best thought of as a relay center or a routing system. Information comes into the brain through the eyes, through the ears, up through from the body through the spinal cord, up the brainstem into the brain, and signals go to the thalamus. And the thalamus then relays that information to other parts of the limbic system as well as to the cerebral cortex. And information within the cerebral cortex goes through the thalamus to get to someplace else. So just like you have bus depots or railroad stations or airport hubs, the thalamus is kind of like an airport hub, a relay center in the brain. And here we see the location of the thalamus, which is right in the center of the brain, a good place for a relay center. Anyone who has damage to the thalamus is going to have a lot of trouble understanding sensory information, a lot of maybe hallucinations or mix-ups with sensory information. Let's learn about a very important and really fun and interesting part of the brain that is literally below the thalamus and is called the below the thalamus. We call it the hypothalamus. Hypo means underneath or below. So hypothalamus is below the thalamus. Here's an illustration. I will show you more in the next slide of the location of the hypothalamus. In these illustrations, we see the location of the hypothalamus just below the thalamus in the limbic system, a very important part of the brain we're going to study in the next few slides. The hypothalamus is the way the brain connects to the body. So the flow of blood goes up into the brain, and chemicals in the blood, like hormones, can cross through to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus can receive signals from the body, from the endocrine system, and then can send signals to the body. It does this, the hypothalamus, by connecting to a gland in the brain called the pituitary gland. So the pituitary gland, as you see in this illustration, is just below the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus can connect to it and send signals to the body. And so the hypothalamus is very important for controlling kind of our motivation of what motivates us, like I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm horny, and so on. That's hypothalamus. The hypothalamus has a lot of jobs related to what we call motivation, things that motivate us, things that move us, things that make us want to do things. These are drives like hunger and thirst and sex and so on. So hypothalamus is our connection from our brain to our body and from our body to our brain. One of the things important about our body is to maintain a balance. You don't want to eat too much, you don't want to eat too little. You don't want to drink too much water, you don't want to drink too little water. So this is called homeostasis. And the hypothalamus is important for helping us maintain homeostasis. A simple example is body temperature. Your body temperature can't go too high or too low. And the hypothalamus regulates that. It has cells that can measure what's going on in the body. It can measure your blood sugar level. It can measure how much water you have in the cells of your body and so on. And then it can tell you when you need more or when you need less. That's the hypothalamus. It's kind of like a thermostat in your house. It's measuring things and then regulating. Here again is an illustration of the location of the hypothalamus and a reminder. Hypothalamus is involved in the fight or flight response because it's part of the limbic system. It's involved in hunger and thirst and sex and metabolism and our endocrine system. That is the parts of our body, the glands that release hormones into our blood. Here is probably the oldest joke in psychology. It's about the hypothalamus, and it was said decades ago. The hypothalamus controls the 4 F's. So if we want to have a kind of summary of what does the hypothalamus do, it controls the 4 F's. 1, fighting. 2, fleeing. That's the fight or flight response. 3, feeding. That's hunger and thirst. And 4, sex. Yeah, you get the joke. Sex does not start with an F. Ha ha ha. Can you think of some words that start with F that we might use for sex, like maybe, I don't know, fun, fornicate, fabulous? Maybe you can think of something. Ha ha ha. That's our joke about the hypothalamus. How does the hypothalamus regulate all of these motivational systems in the body? How does the hypothalamus communicate with the body? It does this mainly through the pituitary gland. So we have in our body a whole bunch of glands called the endocrine system. And these glands are just organs in our body that manufacture chemicals and then release those chemicals into the bloodstream. Those chemicals are called hormones, and those hormones influence your behavior, your mood, your feelings, your daily life is influenced by these hormones. And so hormones are important in psychology, very important. The pituitary gland is called the master gland because it can send out hormones that tell the other glands in your body what to do. So when you're in danger, for example, your limbic system understands that you're in danger. The amygdala and other parts of your limbic system realize the danger. Tell the hypothalamus, hey, there's danger. The hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland to release a hormone that goes through the blood to the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are in your gut, and the adrenal glands will release hormones like adrenaline and other hormones that will prepare your body for danger. So the hypothalamus works mostly through the pituitary gland, which is sometimes called the master gland in your body. So here we see the location of the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and then the pituitary gland. And the pituitary, as we've mentioned on these slides, creates hormones, chemicals that go through the bloodstream, not through the nervous system, through the bloodstream. So our nervous system is one part of our body, our blood system another part of our body, but the two come together at the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. Here's one more illustration that shows location of hypothalamus and pituitary gland and the idea that the pituitary gland releases hormones that go out to various parts of the body and make other glands react with hormones. A good example of a brain hormone is oxytocin. Oxytocin. Don't confuse that with the painkiller OxyContin. This is oxytocin. It's a brain hormone. It's sometimes called the love hormone or the cuddle hormone or the trust hormone. When this hormone is released, it makes us have a closer connection with somebody. So, for example, when babies are born, oxytocin is released into the brain of the baby and the mommy, so that when they then look into each other's eyes, which is important when babies are born, the baby should be given to mommy, and they should look into each other's eyes. This creates an emotional bond, what we call attachment, between the mommy and the baby. Also, when people have sex and they stare into each other's eyes, when you have sex, oxytocin is released into your brain. And when you're staring into somebody's eyes, this starts to create an emotional connection, a bond between you and your partner. Some people have more oxytocin receptors in their brain. Women, on the average, have more than men, and some have fewer. And so some people form these emotional bonds that are very, very powerful, very, very strong. And then when they break up, they're heartbroken. So this is why parents warn and worry about teenagers. They warn their teenagers to not have sex, because the worry is if you have sex with somebody who has low levels of oxytocin receptors, we call them a player. They have sex just for the fun, the physical fun, but they don't form an emotional bond. But if you form an emotional bond with somebody and then they treat you like dirt, you're heartbroken. So oxytocin is an important brain chemical because it helps create emotional bonding and trust. We have psychological experiments where you have men, we inject them with oxytocin, or we give them a nasal spray. You can't drink oxytocin. It goes in your stomach and gets destroyed. It won't get into your brain. But you can use a nasal spray. And when men use the nasal spray of oxytocin, they become more trusting. Uh, so, yes, women tend to have more oxytocin than men on the average, but that's just on the average. Some men have a lot, some men don't. Some women don't have very much. So oxytocin is a good example of a brain hormone, and it is sometimes called the love hormone or the cuddle hormone or the trust hormone. I'm showing you this illustration because I want you to realize that the hypothalamus, we talk about it as if it's this one brain area. Actually, it's hugely complicated, and there are scientists who spend their whole life just studying the hypothalamus because it is so complicated, so complex. And so I'm showing you, you don't have to memorize, of course, all of this information. I'm just showing you this slide so that you understand that the hypothalamus is very complicated. Now let's just pick on a couple areas of the hypothalamus. There's one area that tells you when to start eating. How does it know that? It receives signals from the body. So the body gives off signals telling you, hey, I could use some sugar, I could use some energy. And then the hypothalamus notices that and gives you that feeling of hunger. And then when you've eaten too much, your body gives off hormones. The cells of your body give off hormones that the hypothalamus uh, registers. It records those, and it responds to those by making you feel full, and you feel satiated, and you feel done eating. And so there's a start eating center in the hypothalamus, and there's a stop eating center in your hypothalamus. Now let's look at the next slide and talk about that. Here are two rats. The rat on the left is a normal rat. The rat on the right is very obese. How did this rat get to be obese? Well, this rat, unfortunately, scientists made a little cut, a little lesion in the part of the hypothalamus that tells the rat when to stop eating. So maybe in a high school class, this rat would be called a fat rat. But in college, we call this rat a rat with a lesion, meaning a cut, in the ventromedial nucleus of the hypothalamus. In other words, the place in the hypothalamus that tells the rat when to stop eating. So this rat just doesn't know when to stop eating, and he eats and eats and eats, overeats. He's always hungry. Now, could this happen to people, to humans? Well, no, we don't purposely cut the ventromedial nucleus of the hypothalamus in a human being, but there are genetic disorders that do affect that part of the hypothalamus. So look at the next slide. There is a syndrome called Prader-Willi syndrome. Prader-Willi syndrome. This is a rare genetic disorder that causes a person to have chronic hunger. Their brain does not know when to stop eating. So they just feel like they're starving all the time. Could you imagine just always feeling like, oh my God, I'm starving, I need food. And so these people become very obese. This is a disorder of the hypothalamus, a particular place in the hypothalamus that tells the person when to stop eating. Here are some more examples of Prader-Willi syndrome. This is a mistake that happens in chromosome 15. We're going to learn about chromosomes later in the slides about heredity and genetics. You have chromosomes are the little chemical messages you get from your parents that give the recipes for your body, and chromosomes are numbered in order of size. So chromosome number 15 has a mistake in it. This is Prader-Willi syndrome. Finally, here are a couple cartoons. On the left, the neurologists are having a party. Hey, I don't know why neurologists look like chickens. Anyway, one of them says, "Oh my God, you pinned the hypothalamus on the occipital lobe." Ha ha ha. No, the hypothalamus does not go on the occipital lobe. Hypothalamus is in the limbic system. And on the right, looking at the giraffe, the bird says he doesn't have pituitary gland trouble. They all get that tall. Ah ha ha. All right, we've come to the end of this video. Now that you've learned about the hypothalamus, is it your favorite part of the brain? Be sure to look at some more videos about psychology. I've given you the links here on YouTube.